I recognize Mr. Walberg for 5 minutes.
Madam Chairman, thank you for that opportunity. Secretary, welcome back to the committee room.
Thank you.
We had the opportunity to serve together on this committee, and appreciate you coming back. However, before I go into my main questions, I would be remiss in not at least letting you know of my concern as the position you're in, given that position by the President, confirmed to be in the position. I would have to say that what's going on with our children, regardless of the adults, what's going on with our children right now, I would believe, contrary to science, and we've been told for the past several years to follow the science, follow the science, follow the science, so many things. But what's being foisted on our kids these days, relative to things we wouldn't have countenanced just 3, 4, 5 years ago, and suggestions about their sexuality and gender, etc., is gravely concerning to me, and we probably can talk about that some other day. But it's a great concern to many parents and adults who care about kids, their lives now and for the future. And so your position has much to do with that and making sure a generation moves that will be productive, healthy for the future, and living according to science and nature itself. Mr. Secretary, in April, the New York Times published an article detailing the horrifying reality that unaccompanied migrant children were being released from HHS custody to sponsors who are exploiting them. The lack of coordination between the Department of Labor, the Department of Health and Human Services, and the Department of Homeland Security described in the New York Times piece is alarming. It's the responsibility of HHS to ensure that these children are placed with responsible caregivers after they leave HHS. Yet it appears as though many of these children were placed with human traffickers and were forced to work in dangerous jobs. Did the Department of Labor warn HHS that these children were at risk for human labor trafficking at any point in 2021 and 2022?
Congressman, first on your earlier remarks, I appreciate the way you posed that, and at some point perhaps we'll have opportunity to discuss that type of care that Americans are receiving and need. On this particular question, let me again thank you for the way you posed the question. First, to point out that we are working closely with the Department of Labor to try to coordinate where we can. We don't have jurisdiction over the kids that are in the hands of sponsors. What we can do is work with Labor if they find that there are some markers, signs that perhaps there are certain employers or companies that are violating child labor laws. So what we do is we try to work with them. But this is not one of those cases where we are able to monitor a child who has been placed with a sponsor.
But do you think, I understand it's your responsibility to vet sponsors. Do you think they were properly vetted, these unaccompanied minors who were eventually found to be exploited by human traffickers?
Congressman, yes, and let me tell you why the answer is affirmative. Virtually all of these, well, the vast majority of these children are placed with either the parent or a close family relative. They all go through background checks. We continue to do the checks that you would expect to make sure that if you're going to place a child in a particular home, that they will be safe.
And how did this happen then? If that is the policy, how did this happen that they ended up being human trafficked?
Yes. What I would tell you is that I think the evidence points to is the fact that we have, unfortunately, unscrupulous employers and companies that are willing to take advantage of some of these kids. Not all of them are migrant kids, by the way. There are some U.S. citizen kids. But clearly, migrant children are more vulnerable, and what we see is that they are being taken advantage of by some of these employers. And I hope that we all work together to try to get to the bottom of this.
Well, I would hope so, because it appears that you had the opportunity to return these children to immediate relative or an original sponsor, and ultimately the vetting wasn't done, and they ended up being human trafficked, and that was under your watch.
Congressman, we did the vetting that showed that whether it was a parent or an older brother or sister or an aunt or an uncle, if we can't place them with a close relative like that, then it would be very, very difficult. There are far fewer number who are assigned to someone who's not an immediate or close relative.
They ended up being human trafficked. That's my concern, and we're expecting you, your agency, to make sure that that doesn't happen. And this was the New York Times bringing out this issue. So please help us on that one.
We'll look forward to working with you.
I yield.
I want to ask members to not